see you're here. For those of you that haven't met me in person, again, I am one of the reading specialists over at the New London Elementary School. And I'm back here again with you today to share with you the next chapters in our One Book, One School book, Nuts to You. Now, today you'll notice my background is a little bit different, and today I will not be going down to the barn with the donkeys, as it's way too snowy down there today and they are covered. Instead, I do have a little donkey friend here and someone to go along with it. Hey, Koa, want to come join us for the story? Come on, buddy. Come on up. Come get cozy. This is Koa. This is my little puppy. This is Koa. He is a 3-year-old Great Dane. He's one of my dogs, and he enjoys long hikes. He loves pumpkin-flavored anything. He also loves smelling the flowers, and he's afraid of everything. Don't let his size fool you. So today, we're going back to Nuts to You. Would you like to join us for the story? He's not always the best listener, so hang in there with him. He may be a little on the move today. But today, we're going to get a chance to check back in with our squirrel friends to see what's going on with them. You ready, buddy? You're so excited to hear about the squirrels. I know. It's so exciting. We left off at a really big point too, remember, with the humans coming by? Let's find out what's going to happen next. Chapter 11, Where was Chai? When the racket came crashing and thrashing through the trees, Chai did not lose his head. He ran a little way, sure, but then he turned to see what exactly it was. He was baffled by what he saw. Then he retreated, step by step. Reaching behind him with one paw at a time, he shifted his weight steadily backward as he watched. They were humans, but what were they doing? The humans he had seen before walked underneath the trees on the earth. They had picnics. Sometimes they left tasty scraps behind. There were also humans who would knock the life out of an animal just by pointing at it with a stick. Those you had to watch out for. Yeah, you gotta be careful. Chai glanced over his shoulder to see if his way was clear, and then looked again toward the humans. They were up in the trees. The incredible noise came from what they held in their hands, but it wasn't the death sticks. It was something different. Are you painting a picture in your mind? Do you know what it is yet? Let's keep reading. Chai peered closely. One of them had come quite near. He readied himself to cut and run, but he couldn't help trying to figure out what the thing was. Part of it was extremely silvery, like the surface of a pond. He sniffed, and the acrid odor wrinkled his nose. He took a step back and then another. Chai watched the object enter a solid bow the way a duck's foot enters the water. But while water heels back up and is the same as before, the bow fell heavily to the ground. Thunk. Looking down, Chai saw that the bow was not alone down there. A few others had already fallen. The sound was shrill and grating, angry. There were 3 shouting humans and 3 harshly whining objects. All the noises bounced back and forth. It was hard to tell which sounds were coming from where. Chai covered his ears and stepped back. And again, he thought to say something to, remember our character, T-S-T-S. Remember, one of the ways we can say that is zutza, zutza, like the sound a squirrel makes. He turned, thinking that she must be close by, but he didn't see her. Then he was aware of a shadow, a cloud passing over the sun. When he looked up, he saw that the shadow was not from a cloud, but a dark shape, a chunk of bough falling toward him. You cozy, sir. All better now. He's ready to listen, right? When he looked up, he saw that the shadow was not from a cloud, but a dark shape, a chunk of bough falling toward him. Chai stepped and fell freely through the air. He did not fall far, but it was a panic jump. His form was bad, and he did not spot his landing. His belly flopped hard onto another limb. The wind was knocked out of him. Before he could recover, the dark chunk hit the same limb where he dangled, momentarily limp, and sent him bouncing off on another flight down. Too bad, he thought, that I'm not a flying squirrel. He stretched his arms and legs out just in case. Maybe he had just never tried. Maybe he had ancestors he didn't know about. But when he sensed that it wasn't working, which was right away, Chai looked down in the direction he was falling, just to the ground, and not that far. Okay, he thought, that I can handle. He brought his paws under him for the landing. As he was about to hit the ground, he saw and smelled that he was headed for a slimy, dark mess. Nuts, he said. Fresh owl barf from a sick owl. Excuse me. Which, of course, was not pleasing. But it was also a simple statement about where he was about to land in. By the time he finished saying it, he had landed in it. The pellets of bones, fur, scales, and feathers that a healthy owl coughs up are no big deal. Maybe to a squirrel. But the ones that come from a sick owl, I think you can imagine. Ugh, disgusting. Disgusting, right, Koa? Ugh. Koa likes stinky messes, though. Let's be honest, don't most dogs? Chai sighed as he stepped away from the gooey mess. He looked around for something to wipe himself off on and found a patch of moss. That would do. That would do nicely. As he rubbed the slime from his fur, he thought, it could have been worse. It could have been. There were any number of foul things it could have been. Still, when a squirrel tries to feel grateful to have landed in sick owl, you know what. He was not having the best day. When he had cleaned his fur as well as he could, Chai stood up, ready to go again, which was when he felt that he was being observed. But from where? And by what? What's looking at him, Koa? It's you, tail wagging. His position on the food chain told him that he must run first and ask questions later. Chai bolted back up the tree, then away from the humans and their falling chunks of limbs. Away, 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 just away. Then zigzag, up and down, back and forth, double back, confuse it, lose it. So, where was Chai? I wish I could tell you. He didn't even know himself. Have you figured out what he's running from yet? Use your classroom book and illustrations to help you do that. Might give you some details that you might be missing if you haven't quite made that picture in your mind. All right, chapter 12, a human conversation, which, for the record, is untranslated because you already speak human. Do you speak human? I'm not sure. He's not sure. The human who had shared food with, remember T-S, Zutza, unwrapped another sandwich. Peanut butter, he said. They love it. They must be so freaky for them. All the noise and everything. I know, said one of the others. Like, oh no, it's the end of the world. Don't worry, animals, this one called out. We're just clearing the power line. We're leaving you the forest. You guys, said the third. It's like when you lift up a rock and there's an ant's nest underneath. They all swarm off, and they have a new colony built in about 5 minutes. They don't even think about it. It's instinct. There's always more dirt, though, said the first one, who had a silvery fur with a tail that came from the back of his head instead of where tails usually are. Now remember, we're actually talking about humans here, not squirrels, so don't get lost in this. This might even be a chapter you want to replay and reread and really try to picture that in your mind. A human tail. A ponytail. For the ants, there isn't always more trees for the squirrels. Aren't always more trees, I mean. Well, we are leaving them lots of trees, so one of them who had talked about the ants. This one had reddish-brown, shaggy, bristly fur all around its head, except for where its eyes, nose, and mouth could be seen. They don't know that, said the silvery one. Well, maybe you should tell them, said the one that was a female and had a dark head fur with the texture of lichen. I would, said the silvery one, if I could, if I knew how. Chapter 13, a hard question. So back to our squirrel friends. Swiftly and skillfully, Chai ran until he sensed that he was safe. Better safe than sorry. Then, because he knew that he would have to return to where the awful noise was, if he wanted to rejoin his friends, he cocked his ear and listened for it. But he could hear nothing. Remember, they're off having their lunch. Aside from the normal sounds of the forest. Had he run that far? Chai looked around. Not a clue. He sniffed. Listened. Nothing. A deer and her fawn browsed in the undergrowth. A woodpecker tapped nearby. A whiff of skunk drifted up. Had he run a great distance, or was the racket all over and done with? Chai went up top to see what he could see. When he found the line of frozen spider webs, remember, those are really power lines in the squirrel's mind. They're thinking they look like spider webs, though. Poking out of the forest, something was different. Chai squinted. It almost looked as if the forest had been split, chewed away around the spider webs, leaving them in a lonely, unprotected trough. Up to a point. Then the canopy remained undisturbed. He didn't know what to make of it. He looked for the silver eggs in the great beak to orient himself. Then he descended to traveling level and headed back. As he drew closer, he passed huddles of squawking and squabbling creatures. Scraps of conversations reached his ears. "Monsters," said a chickadee. "Giants! Fiends!" My heart is still pounding. My down is standing on end. It was quite frightening, a rabbit murmured to a groundhog. I know I am easily frightened, but even so. There was something so big, something scary. "Hoodlums," came from a small screech owl, screeching to no one in particular from the safety of a hollow in a beech tree. "Barbarians!" But what can you do? You pick yourself up. You pull yourself together. You move on. And Chai did move on. Presently he came to the third frozen spiderweb. The forest still surrounded it, but not far off he saw the kind of brightness that comes from a clearing that had not been there before. He decided to go up the spiderweb for a better view. He had climbed just higher than the treetops when a voice from overhead called out, "Jed!" Startled, he looked up. 2 reddish squirrels were watching him from a ledge that was part of the spiderweb. "Nice lad, Jed," said the smaller one, patting the top of his own head. "It's not Jed," said the other. "Sorry, we thought he was someone else. Someone we know. Name of Jed." "He looks like Jed," said the first. "It's gray, you know." "Jed ain't the only gray squirrel there is," said the big one. "Do you know Jed?" asked Chai. "Do you know Jed?" asked Chai, climbing higher. "Have you seen him?" "He talks funny like Jed too," said the small one, snickering. "Don't mind him," said the other. He extended his paw as Chai reached the level. "I'm Jork, right?" "No, I'm Sam," said the small one. Recovering his manners, he added, "We is just about to chow down. Do you care to partake?" Then he turned to Chuck and said, behind his paw, he added, "You probably don't know what a pine cone is either." "I'm Chai," said Chai, "and you're right, I don't." So they showed him as they had showed Jed only the day before. They marveled at his story. "You gray types is quite the adventurous lot," said Chuck. "We reddish tends to stay put." "So do I," said Chai, "usually." Chuck and Sam were staying put by moving into a large cavity in the corner of the ledge. They showed Chai how they had already begun to cozy it up with grasses and leaves. After a brief tour, they stepped back out into what Chuck was calling the veranda and gazed at the unusual view before them. The forest had been removed from all around the buzz paths. A long corridor of empty space stretched as far as the eye could see, until a curve took it out of sight. Some humans sat on the ground at the close end of the corridor having a picnic. Chai couldn't understand why the buzz paths needed so much empty air around them, but having traveled here on the buzz paths, he understood that there were some of the paths that passed through his own grove. One of them was within jumping distance of his mom and dad's nest. How frightened they would be if this destruction happened there. Terrified. And then it dawned on him that this would happen there. "Oh, don't be afraid. It's okay. I told you, afraid of everything." That's what's going on. Their home, his home, everyone's home would disappear. He had to go tell them, warn them, help them. He would warn everyone. "But they're all done," said Chuck, when Chai told them his plan. Sam stretched, basking in the sunlight. "Listen how quiet it is," he said. "They're not all done," said Chai. "If they were, they would leave." Still he hesitated, not because of Chuck's words, but because of Jed and Zutza. They were somewhere in this strange place far from home, maybe together, maybe each alone. How on earth would he find them? How could he not try? What a good friend. At the same time, in a definite location that he knew how to get to, everyone else he loved was unaware of the mayhem and destruction coming their way. He was only one squirrel. There wasn't much time. What should he do? What would you do if it were you? Do you go back and tell everybody what's coming, or do you continue forward and search for your missing friends? Whew, that's a tough decision for sure. All right, last chapter for our video today. Chapter 14, Looking for Chai. Zutza and Jed circled around the chopped-off edge of the ragged new clearing. They called out to Chai, turning and shouting in every direction. Then they waited after each shout, listening. They stepped deeper into the forest and traveled back around in a bigger circle, looking and calling and listening. They moved carefully but swiftly. They were not alone. Everywhere they met other creatures calling out for their lost ones, asking, "Have you seen a chipmunk with an extra black stripe? Have you seen a young bat? An old possum with a torn ear?" Zitza and Jed asked too. Have you seen a handsome gray squirrel, the best friend anyone ever had? He wears an acorn hat with a sprig of goldenrod in it. Are you sure? They knew that Chai could be very far away by now. He could be anywhere, absolutely anywhere. How do you know when it makes no sense to keep looking? They crept close to the edge again and watched the humans. I talked to one of them, Jed, said Zitza, or at least it talked to me. One of who? Asked Jed. Them, said Zitza, gesturing. The humans. Before you found me, something came over me. It must have been the smell of the food. The peanut butter. They had this really delicious... So what did you do? Jed interrupted, incredulous. You went down and asked for some? I guess so. All of a sudden I was down there, and one of them, the one with the tail on its head, spoke to me and tossed me some food, as if we were trying to make friends. Jed had never spoken to a human. He didn't even know if it was possible. Leave it to Zitza, he thought. If anyone could talk to them, it would be her. What did it say, he asked. Who knows, said Zitza. Their speech is so garbled. It has so many sounds in it. The thing is, I don't understand what they're doing, but I don't think they mean us any harm. Jed couldn't help but smile at his friend's warm heart. The thing is, he said, they are chomping their way through the woods, and it doesn't really matter why. We still have to get out of the way. Well, she said, I just wanted to tell you that. That's good, he said. That's a good thing to know. The three humans were standing up, stretching, moving around. Jed spoke with a calmness that he did not feel inside. I think we have to go, he said, before it starts again. Chai will be okay. He can take care of himself, but think of... He was interrupted by the harsh, peevish, guttural purr of one of those tree chewers. Have you figured out what the tree chewers are yet? Ooh. Zitza said, okay, but we have to leave messages, a trail. How can we? Asked Jed. They're cutting everything away. We'll have to leave the messages right on the buzz path, she said. Okay, said Jed. Is it all right if I ask how again? They were standing on a limb right in the path of destruction. The humans walked toward them. Zitza looked around. Hastily, she pulled a nearby leaf from its stem with both paws. She nibbled the edge of the leaf and then tore it halfway along the main vine. She nibbled a hole right in the middle and spat out the leafy pulp. Then she climbed down onto one of the buzz paths and wrapped the leaf around it. The leaf swung upside down, but it stayed there. Jed watched admiringly. It probably wouldn't stay put in a stiff breeze, and he didn't know that Chai would recognize it as a message even if he saw it. Then again, maybe he would. Who else but Zitza would make such a thing? Good idea, he said. Zitza saw his mouth moving, but she couldn't hear his words. The racket had begun. She flinched at the noise, but only because it was so loud and so sudden. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. It was something you could hardly run from. And they had a plan. Hurriedly, they left the messages on the other two buzz paths. Then they were off. And that leaves us off with our next section, which is going to be Chapter 15, Ill Winds, Chill Winds. Whew, lots of actioning happening in this part of the story. Lots of things still to be decided and determined. Lots of turmoil with our characters too. Do they go back to home? Do they continue in search of their friends? How do they let their friend know to follow them to safety? Whew, lots to figure out in this part of the story. Unfortunately, I'll have to leave you hanging there though. It looks like my friend is ready for a nap. And it's time for some dinner before nap time too. I'm going to leave you there, my friends. We'll pick up where we left off the next time. I hope you're really enjoying this special project together. Before I wrap up, too, I know one of the kids' favorite things is always to see just how big this little puppy truly is. Let me see if I can give you a sneak peek at that before we wrap up today. You ready, buddy? All right, let's see what we can do. We got to move everybody back a little bit. Back they go. Ready? Give hugs. Oh.